Hello and welcome to another edition of the Forza Napoli podcast. I'm your host, Joe Fischetti. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. I wasn't planning on doing a Hellas Verona review pod, but after all the controversy that we saw in this match, I couldn't help myself. I just wanted to get a few thoughts in on the 2-2 draw. So I'll be flying solo for this one. And of course, there was a lot of talk after this match. There were two big controversies that I wanted to discuss on this podcast, which will be a little bit shorter than normal. The first controversy happened in the first half. Napoli were already trailing 1-0, that is, when Verona were awarded a penalty kick for a handball committed by Alessandro Bongiorno. Now, my initial reaction to this play was not again. We seen Buongiorno's been struggling this season. He conceded a penalty kick against Inter, also for a handball. Thankfully, that one didn't end up costing us. He committed or conceded an own goal in the Champions League against PSV. Again, I don't know if that ended up really costing us because we got blown out of the water on that one. Um, you can see why he's lost his starting role to Juan Jesus. You know, Napoli, as Patrick Hendrick mentioned on the broadcast, Napoli had four consecutive clean sheets with Juan Jesus in the lineup, and Buongiorno comes in, and obviously it's not entirely on him, but he comes into the lineup and we concede two goals. Then my second reaction was, okay, this was pretty unlucky. I mean, if anyone's questioning, or doubting him going up for a header. Admittedly, he's not very good in the air for such a tall center back, but if you're doubting him for going up in the header for a header with his arm out, I suggest you go try and jump with your arms by your side because what you'll see is that is very unnatural to jump with your hands kind of taped or glued to your hips. The other thing that's really unlucky is he really doesn't know where the ball is during that 50-50, and we'll talk about why in a second. But it drops from straight above and just by chance lands right on his hand. So my second reaction was, okay, not great in the air, but this was pretty unlucky nonetheless. I don't know how hard I want to be on Buongiorno for that one. And then after the match, we saw the images and the slow motion replays, and it appeared that he was fouled by who was it? Valentini, I believe, who was a bit of a culprit on a few different occasions. Um, you can see quite clearly that Valentini jumps before Buongiorno, and as Buongiorno is on his way up, Valentini's on his way down, and Valentini's arm kind of goes over the shoulder of Buongiorno. You can even see that at that point where his arm goes over the shoulder, that Buongiorno's head kind of turns, and which is probably why he lost sight of the ball. And then he also kind of stumbles backwards because he's lost balance. And this one goes to VAR because initially on the field it was ruled no foul. The play continued, and then only after the play was stopped did the VAR Valerio Marini call Matteo Marchetti to the pitch side monitor, which means that the officials had the opportunity to see that this foul was committed, and for whatever reason, they decided that was not a foul, or maybe they were just focused solely on whether a handball was committed. Even the referee delegation or the AIA came out and supported both decisions on both controversies. We'll get to the other one in a second. So their official position is that they didn't make any mistakes here, but I think most people who have seen this and talked about this in Italian media and the calcio pundits around the world are pretty aligned that a foul was committed here. Gift Orban converted the penalty kick. It was actually a really well taken penalty kick. Vanya Milinkovic-Savic is not an easy goalkeeper to beat. He had stopped, I think, 2 out of his 3 penalty kicks prior to this one. and he still guessed correctly on this one as well. The shot was basically unstoppable, hit with power and accuracy into the bottom corner. Orban was cautioned for his celebration, which I thought was very distasteful. He did a kind of like slitting the throat motion towards the camera. And, you know, Nigeria has produced a wealth of football talent over the past few years. There are so many good players in all the top leagues now that hail from Nigeria. But I have to say, at least the Nigerians that played or have played in Serie A are starting to give their countrymen a bad name. Like, we all know Victor Osimhen very well from his time at Napoli, and there was some heated moments there. One was not on him, but you think of his red card early in his time at Napoli. And earlier this week, he got into an argument with one of his teammates at AFCON in a match where Nigeria were winning, I think against Mozambique 4-0, and he freaked out because his teammates weren't didn't pass to him, and he had already scored 2 goals in that match. I think Lookman tried to kinda calm that situation down. I don't think it'll happen, but at one point there were talks that he might actually leave the team and head back to Turkey while they're still, I think they're currently in the quarterfinals at AFCON. We've seen the situation with Ademola Lookman, and his disagreement with Gasperini at Atalanta and then with Juric at Atalanta. So for whatever reason, the Nigerians that have been playing in Serie A or are currently in Serie A, and again, I don't these are just 3 examples, so I don't wanna generalize, but I don't know what's going on there, but I definitely did not like that reaction from Orban. Um, that goal, which was the second for Verona, came 11 minutes after their first goal, and in parts, like, obviously, the whole Buongiorno foul situation is a big part of it, but it was also partly because Napoli were quite rattled after conceding the first goal. Um, they It looked like even players that are normally very reliable, like Scott McTominay, for example, missed a couple passes. He had one play where he kinda tried to turn back, and I think was it Nias or Emin Sarr maybe that dispossessed him and nearly had a clear break, and Vanya had to come out off his line and clear the ball out for a throw in. And actually that throw in led to a second throw in closer to the Napoli end of the pitch, and that second throw in is what led to the penalty kick. But prior to the goal, Napoli actually looked pretty good. I thought we were in control of the match, we were moving well, the energy looked good, we didn't seem to be taking anything for granted. Okay, we didn't create a ton of chances, we had that one Elmas chance, but it felt like we were kind of building up towards scoring a goal, and then we got caught on the break, and that, again, really kinda rattled us, and again, I don't wanna put it on I certainly don't wanna put it entirely on McTominay, or the kinda bad play after that goal on McTominay. There were a number of culprits on the first goal, I think. I don't wanna blame Rachmani too much, but he did get beat. I did like that kind of aggressive press at midfield. Orban did a really good job of holding the ball up at midfield. Um, I thought when if you freeze the frame, I should have pulled up the graphic, but if you freeze the frame when Nias overlaps, there are at least 3 or 4 Napoli players standing in the area, kind of ball watching. I know Lang was one. Buongiorno, unfortunately, was another one, and not just ball watching, but his positioning was he might as well not have been there because, like, one thing you're taught at a young age when you're defending is that you wanna be between the ball and your own goalkeeper, and if you look at where Buongiorno's positioned there, now maybe he's thinking, "'Kay, I don't wanna block Vanya's view," but if he's better positioned with Nias passing the ball from that part of the area, he easily could have blocked that ball for a corner kick, and it never would have resulted in a goal. Now, it's easy to say that, in retrospect. Patrick Hendrick put a lot of the blame on the broadcast on Di Lorenzo, I think because he also appeared to be kind of ball watching. He probably should have been checking his shoulders to see if that run was coming in, but when you consider where that run came from and how fast Freza was running, Martin Freza was running, I don't blame Di Lorenzo as much as I blame Politano because Freza was playing as the left wing back in Verona's 3-5-2, and Politano was playing in the as the right wing back in our 3-4-3 or 3-4-2-1. And you can even see on the replay that Politano was kind of late in tracking the run. And that could be for various reasons. It could be because of fatigue. He just played 3 days prior. It could be because he had picked up a knock on his calf, which he mentioned after he was kind of limping after his post match press conference for this one. Although I suspect it's not going to be anything that stops him from playing. He's a pretty resilient player. But Politano himself even admitted in that post-match press conference that he was he could have done a better job of tracking that run. And then, it's okay to um, switch off once you get into the area, especially if you're kind of zonal marking and leave that player for somebody else to pick up. But clearly the communication in the box wasn't very good there because Di Lorenzo had no idea that run was coming in. And then of course, just like the who was it, for Genoa that scored that similar kind of back heel, Ekatorp, I think. Teams seem to pull out these incredible finishes against us for whatever reason. So, the first goal, all that is just to say that um, the first goal kind of rattled us and put us in a bad spot for the second goal. But credit to the players, credit to Conte, because at halftime, I don't know what Conte said, but they came out with a totally different intensity, clearly looking to at least, what I said to a few friends at halftime was, we just need to get a goal early in the second half, and we're right back in it, and then the momentum shifts, and who knows what ends up happening. I don't think anyone was truly expecting to pull off a come from behind victory. Napoli's record is really, really good. I think 10 wins, no draws, no losses when we score first, but it's not great when we don't score first. So I don't know how many people were really expecting us to come from behind, even against a weaker opponent like Verona. But we looked really good at the start of the second half. Um, we scored that 2-1 goal, and then we had the second controversy, and this was um the Højlund quote unquote handball, where the Politano crosses the ball from the right wing. He actually did a really good job of eluding two defenders to play that cross in, and it kind of bounces off a player in the area. I couldn't tell if it hit McTominay or if it hit a Verona player in the area. Højlund controls the ball with his chest and volleys past Montipo, who admittedly wasn't very good. That helped us as well. Like on that first goal, the McTominay goal, he came off his line and was not convincing at all, and we end up scoring. And then on this play, the shot hits his hand, and maybe it was just hit with too much power, and he wasn't able to keep it out. But this was another one where initially the goal was called a goal on the field, and the VAR called Marchetti to review it, and they take it away for a handball. Now, I must say, on the initial replays, it looked to me like the ball did in fact hit his hand, and if so, even if the ball only just slightly narrowly grazed his hand, that would have been the correct decision, because the handball rule is different when you're attacking in the area and when you're defending in the area. When you're defending, your hand has to be, or your arm has to be in an unnatural position, meaning makes your body unnaturally bigger for for it to be considered a handball. So in the Buongiorno case, they deemed that because his arm was up and to his side, that is not a natural position. He's making his body bigger, therefore that's a handball. When you're attacking in the area, it does not matter where your hands are. They could be in an unnatural position or a natural position. If the ball touches your hand, regardless of where it is, immediately before you score a goal, that is considered a handball. And therefore, if you're of the view that it even grazed his hand before the shot, as unlucky or unfortunate as that may be, then it would have been the correct decision. However, in subsequent replays, it's not at all clear whether this ball actually touches Højlund's hand. And if you look, I'll show you the video for those that are watching on YouTube that Højlund himself posted on Instagram. And if you watch the kind of blue mark on the ball as it's spinning, it does appear to slightly change direction right there. And I'll play it again in a second just to show you. But the line appears to just slightly change direction before it hits his chest, and so that may be why some people are of the view that it grazed his hand right there. Um, that being said, Højlund himself was convinced that the ball did not hit his hand. He posted on Instagram saying, "Didn't even touch the ball with the hand while we go again Sunday, Forza Napoli sempre." So, um, it's not entirely clear. Højlund's convinced. Obviously, he's not going to admit if he handled the ball either. But for me, the frustrating thing on this play was that Matteo Marchetti did not even go to the monitor, which means that the VAR was so convinced that a handball had occurred that they decided it wasn't even necessary for the official to review it himself, the lead official. And remember, this was ruled a goal on the field, which means it must have been a clear and obvious error to overturn that decision to cancel the goal effectively. And looking at these replays, yeah, we might speculate about the blue mark or whatever, but it's obviously not clear and obvious that he actually handled the ball. And so I think this is another mistake that I'm boggled. My mind is boggled. Maybe the officials, because they've made so many egregious errors in the past few weeks or this season, that they just, because this one's a bit 50-50, or I wouldn't even call it 50-50, frankly, but maybe they just didn't want to admit yet another error. So, again, I don't know. Who knows what would have happened? Like, it's easy for us to say, had this been considered a goal, then Napoli would have won the match 3-2 because it ended up 2-2, and we had one chalked off. You could argue this match should have finished 3-1 or even 4-1. Although the other goal, the McTominay goal from the free kick where Rachmani kind of played the ball down to him, I think that was clearly an offside. We had the semi-automated offside technology for that one. So, but still, Napoli put the ball in the back of the goal 4 times in one half and came out with a 2-2 draw. The other controversy, but that is again, we don't know if that's how it would have played out had that ball gone in, but it did kind of feel like we would have had a good amount of time. We still had a good amount of time, frankly, to find the winner, but you could see how gassed the players were by the end of the match. I think the equalizer was scored around the 82nd minute. So I still feel like Napoli were pretty hard done by here. The only other one I wanted to mention very briefly was this crazy kind of headlock that, again, Valentini, the same guy that appeared to have fouled Buongiorno in the first half, committed on Elmas. This was a play where a pass is played to Elmas around midfield. He controls it with his chest first. It was a really good touch, actually, because the pass was played in with a lot of power. And then he holds up to hold his ground. And I don't know if I tried to see if Elmas maybe lifted an elbow or something because Valentini was holding his nose or his upper lip. I think what happened was when Elmas held his ground, Valentini's own arm kind of hit Elmas's back and bounced back into his own face. And then he retaliated and basically chokes Elmas, and somehow he got away without, in my opinion, what should have been a red card, but he doesn't even get a yellow card on this play, which, again, another head scratcher from the officiating. I guess that kind of sums up how the officiating went in this match. The only positives for me, I suppose you can say, and I'll close with this, is that it was still good for the club, for the team and their morale to make that come from behind that remonta, to to finish with a draw. We preserved our unbeaten record at the Maradona. For a while there, it looked like it was going to end. We went the entire calendar year of 2025 without suffering a defeat at home. And then in like the first week of 2026 or thereabouts, we nearly suffered our first defeat at home. So we preserved that record. I don't think too many people really care that much about it, though we obviously would have rather won. But I think this also is a big motivation for Conte, both the comeback in the second half and the kind of officiating scandal, if you want to call it that. I think Conte can use that to really motivate the guys ahead of our big match on Sunday against Inter. And of course, the big talking point around that is whether David Neres will be fit to play. The injury is clearly not as serious as we initially expected, which is good. He didn't start training though until I believe Thursday, so we have basically Friday and Saturday to assess his condition, and decide whether he'll be able to play this match. If I was a betting man, I would say he's not going to play against Inter. He'll probably be in the lineup, and if we need to bring him off the bench, we can try to do that. But I suspect Neres is not going to play, which would be a huge, huge blow for us. We will have Mazzocchi back in the lineup. He served his one-game suspension after getting sent off against Lazio. And then we'll see. It looks like the speculation is that we'll basically play Elmas as one of the, in the Neres position, either in the Neres position or the Lang position. If so, in other words, we'll keep the same, obviously the same goalkeeper, and Vanya Meret is not quite ready to go yet, but he's getting closer to a return. We'll play the back three of Di Lorenzo, Rachmani, and Juan Jesus, which is what everyone was expecting. Jesus was rested for the Verona match. Also, he was one booking away from a yellow card suspension, so I think that's why he didn't even come in off the bench, to make sure he's not sent off and doesn't miss the Verona match. And then the midfield four of Politano at right wing back, McTominay and Lobotka in the middle, and Spinazzola at left wing back. He was also rested for that, to be fresh. And Spinazzola actually looked really good off the bench. He added that creativity that we needed against Verona. And then again, the front three, Højlund at striker, and we'll see if Neres can go. If not, it'll be Elmas and Lang. Okay, that is where I will leave it. I hope you enjoyed this quick review pod. I hope you've been able to move on. Hopefully I didn't just piss you off again by talking about it again, if you had already moved on. But we will definitely be back after the Inter match to talk about that one. It is a massive, massive fixture in this calendar. Obviously, Inter now are currently 4 points clear of us in the table. Milan also dropped points, so they pulled a little bit away from their city rivals midweek. Inter are in absolutely incredible form right now. They're firing on all cylinders. Everybody seems to be playing well. Lautaro is having a fantastic season. He tends to be a very streaky player, but we'll see if we can end that streak or put an end to it. It doesn't look like there's going to be much stopping him right now. Zielinski, former Napoli player, obviously is in fine form as well. Kivu has gotten him playing at levels pretty close to what he was playing at Napoli. He scored a classic, kind of typical Zielinski banger with his left foot. I don't recall if it was midweek or last weekend, but Lautaro teed him up and he just fired a rocket with his left past the goalkeeper. So Inter are looking really good. It's at the Meazza as well. So it's not going to be an easy match, but it's one where I think we can't afford to lose. If we lost, we'd fall 7 points behind Inter in the table. That might just be too big of a gap to make up, considering how many points we've already dropped this season. If we can get a draw, I would be, I guess, content with that. We'd be within touching distance, 4 points back of Inter still. And obviously, we want to win this match, which would reduce the gap to 1. Okay, that is where I will leave it. I hope everyone enjoys the Inter match. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, please give us a like and a rating wherever you listen to your podcast, Apple, Spotify. Leave us a review as well, if you don't mind. If you're watching on YouTube, or if you would like to, head over to YouTube, Forza Napoli Podcast, and also like and subscribe. Subscribe to the channel, like the video. All of that stuff helps to just build the reach of the podcast. And if you want to get a hold of me, you can find me on X mostly. We're on all the social media platforms, TikTok, Instagram, all of that stuff. But usually you can reach me on X at Joe underscore Fischetti5. But until next time, I'm Joe Fischetti. Forza Napoli sempre.